Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. This week, we're kicking off with an NFL Conference Championship weekend in review from an inside Prime Sports and Betcris perspective, going game by game with Adam's breakdown on the results, as well as Joe's top takeaways. Adam, starting with the Patriots' 10-7 slugfest of a win over the Broncos. That second half snowstorm looked pretty on TV, even if the play on the field was largely anything but pretty. How were the results for Prime Sports and Betcris?
So I will say this, that I've never seen sort of two games at this stage of the season as balanced as they generally were going into them. Like there really wasn't a lot of sweat, and there was a bit of variance on the totals and things like that. 3 wasn't a great number on that game. It opened 5.5, went up to 6, and then just came charging down. Watching that first drive, I was thinking, maybe the guys that spend all their time in data and working on this actually saw something coming this week, because the Masters were definitely driving that number down early on. And there was a little bit of buyback when it got to 3.5 heading the other way, whether it was they were just middling their early positions and saw value there, or it was just a different group coming in. But overall, wasn't a great day. Seems like both games just kind of landed the wrong way as they should. Seattle in the over, Patriots in the under in the end. But landing on the 3 was kind of what did us in that early game.
And Joe, part of me feels like the Patriots' AFC title run has been less about them doing anything all that great and maybe more about taking what their often inept opposition has given them, while part of me also appreciates their ability to avoid self-destruction in their own right. How much of the Patriots' run do you attribute to their performance versus that of their opposition? And how does that shape what you expect to see from them come the Super Bowl?
If I was Mike Bravel, I would buy a Powerball lottery ticket today, because I've never seen a run of luck and fortune for, just basically the circumstances and the opposition just falling perfectly for them. I don't have any Patriots hate or anything like that, but it was just watching the way that they've progressed. They've seen either teams self-destruct or commit suicide, frankly, on their way to the Super Bowl. The only thing you could say is if you are a Patriot hater, running into Seattle in the Super Bowl, that's a team that's clearly firing on all cylinders. So it does make you kind of wonder, like, okay, well, what's the Black Swan event that I can bet on somewhere, that who on the Seahawks is going to get hurt or something like that? What's going to happen on their way to the Super Bowl that's going to then tilt the championship game in their favor? But just an unreal run of luck for those guys.
And before we move off of the AFC title game altogether, Adam, wanted to circle back and touch on live betting. I know that's been a recurring theme for us. Specifically curious as to how the market reacted to that sudden change in second half playing conditions and how that netted out on your side of the counter.
Yeah, I think they came pretty hard for the under on that. Again, general aspect of these games is you have the point spread and the total, and the model's meant to lay it out cleanly. It doesn't. This is where the traders, where I've always said the hybrid of the models and the traders and the eyeballs are ultimately what helps or wins this game for the bookmakers side, because the model is not going to read that storm coming in and then ultimately, drop those points very quickly. I think the other aspect of it was, I noticed some betting coming on New England when Denver went for the 4th and 1, didn't get it. And then there was just a feel of momentum, like that was an opportunity missed. Go up by 10. I know, be aggressive, go up 14, might lock in the game. But that just felt like a spot where people sort of just identified that the momentum has switched, missing that. And then they've come out and what'd they miss? Another 1-2 field goals or whatnot. But the live betting, as I was getting on a plane, sort of seeing the action coming in, it was definitely identifying that momentum was going to switch and the models weren't going to read that total, which if that was there early in the week, the total could have been mid to high 30s, low 40s. And, you've got to really, those are the opportunities for people that really watch the game, know the game, study the game, to sort of jump in those moments, knowing that the models aren't going to react how they should react because they're just playing off data and what the closing line was.
You almost got to wonder, like, in this arms race that you have between books, trading teams, syndicates, smart guys out there, eventually it's like, because the way that, the NFL has tacked on additional games in the regular season, they've stretched this out. Now we're going to practically mid-February before the end of this season. We have, more teams made it deeper into the playoffs that are playing in outdoor venues in climates where it is absolutely terrible. Playing outdoors in Denver, playing outdoors in New England, playing outdoors in Chicago. It almost seems like having a staff meteorologist be able to be on here. And then not just knowing when you have weather coming, but what time it's coming. The first half and the second half of that Denver game couldn't have been more starkly different. And to Adam's point, because this is another thing that's been influenced by analytics that, you're going to go for it on 4th and 1 and everything like that. What's really amazed me is there should probably be more hybrid in the coaching staff making decisions. That was strictly an analytics play that somebody on their spreadsheets, they're all sitting there looking at their laminated sheets on the sidelines, are looking at, how this translates into game condition. And there has to be somebody with judgment, like an old salt trader, old salt coach who says no, right now, take the points, get up, and then you put the other team down in a big hole. So I think, a game like that yesterday proves that for all the data points that we have right now, our ability to crunch data and things like that, the trader with judgment or the coach with judgment is still probably paramount in these fields.
Well, from a close but relatively uneventful AFC championship game to an NFC championship game that was a barn burner until a somehow scoreless fourth quarter, the Seahawks are back in the big game for a Super Bowl 49 rematch with the Patriots on the heels of their 31-27 win over the Rams. Adam, you mentioned 3, not a great number for the AFC championship game to have landed on. Based on last week's episode, 4 was a much better number than 3 for the NFC championship game. Elaborate a bit on how this result was for Prime Sports and Betcris.
Yeah, 3 would have been a massive disaster on this game because generally when we're looking at it, there was, the Masters were on the -2.5 or the +3, +3.5. For me, this number looked light all week, right in the end. Didn't see one iota of the game as I was 37,000 feet in the air, but sort of watched a bit of it afterwards and saw it go back and forth. Generally, this one again was very well balanced. Total started to get some overaction, which didn't end up on the right side of that, but not as bad as the earlier game. But thankfully, it fell on 4 and not 3. But yeah, it looked a cracker of a game, back and forth and whatnot. So, but I did happen to look at the box score and was sort of first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. What the hell happened? Fourth quarter, did they have the snow come in as well? Because those two teams looked like, they were moving it up and down at the end of that third quarter, pretty much every drive going 80, 90 yards. So, yeah, in the end, we got the 2 teams remaining. And I think from viewership, NFL kind of thing, that's ended up on a matchup they're probably a bit more happier than Denver, Seattle, of what that could have worked out to be.
And Adam, from a live betting perspective on this one, it felt like the Seahawks were pretty close to pulling away a couple times, but the Rams never fully seemed to lose contact. How did that dynamic play out in terms of what you saw unfold as the game was in progress?
Yeah, so I looked at the charts after the game, and there was some where they sort of took those high plus points. These two just historically have close games, back and forth all the way through. And the Rams sort of have that offense that can, turn it on very quickly when needed as well. So I think when it got to double-digit points at times, there was some buyback the other way. And that's generally you end up with the way these games go back and forth now, you really end up as a house, when it comes back towards the number, no matter how far away it gets, usually ends up being a bad result because a lot of people are thinking these numbers are really efficient and there's a lot of back and forth. So when it does get out a little bit, that you do get that natural action that's betting, the opposite way of where the line's moving back to where the original one pointed to, especially in the efficiency of the playoff lines.
And Joe, watching Rams Seahawks felt an awful lot like watching the de facto Super Bowl featuring the 2 best teams in the league. What did you make of the game and the degree of difficulty for Seattle in this matchup relative to their next matchup with New England?
Well, like I said in the previous segment, Mike Vrabel ought to buy a Powerball ticket because they've had luck. One of the things that you saw, I think, in that fourth quarter, with it just being a nothing burger score-wise, is I think it was a combination of, the defenses really showing that, look, we're in third games against these 2 teams, and that I don't care how deep Sean McVay's playbook is. What did he have left that Seattle hadn't already seen? And couple that with the exhaustion. I mean, that was a back and forth game. They've played long seasons. I just didn't think they had anything in the tank there at the end. It was easy for the defenses to catch them. Now, is 2 weeks enough for the Seahawks to get their gas back for a game against, a team that's going to come in and I think might have a little bit of like mystique and motivation going for them? I mean, Mike Vrabel, for as much as I like to make fun of the guy, that guy seems to be the master of motivation, gets players and his team to be able to play over and above what you would consider to be their capacity. He's like Michael Carrick of the NFL right now. So it'll be interesting to see just how much recovery Seattle can put in right now, because that's what I think it was total gas out there at the end of the game.
Yeah, I guess fortunately for the Seahawks, it'll be 2 bye weeks in the span of about a month leading up to the Super Bowl. So we may see them at full strength, but we'll put the NFL on the back burner for the time being because, Adam, before Conference Championship Sunday, Saturday featured UFC 324 and the first event under the UFC's 7-year, $7.7 billion deal with Paramount. Of note, one fight got pulled from the card just hours before the event due to suspicious betting activity. So how were the UFC 324 results for Prime Sports and Betcris in general, given the significance of the card? And what, if anything, did your team identify in terms of irregularities with that match in question?
Yeah, so it was actually really good volume. When I was looking at it Friday afternoon for Saturday card, the volume was up. Results were good. Actually, I'd released the data play on Friday on BVB that the Underdog was going to win that main event against Paddy. So yeah, all in all, I think it's maybe picked up some audience that it didn't have previously, ones that weren't paying the pay-per-view or couldn't find it through other methods. It's now just in front of them on their subscription, whatnot, of Paramount. So I didn't get a chance to really sort of test the live and see how that is, but that's something that I'm looking forward to do as we move forward. As for the fight that was pulled, I did check with the team today. They did get word Thursday that there was possibility of a fix on this one, or at least something dodgy happening. So they pulled it from Thursday. They did open it up again with low limits Friday and quickly pulled it down again. So seems like there is, where there's some smoke, there is some fire on this one because the tip was out early. And I guess by the time it got to the UFC, they pulled it before they needed to.
All right, well, from the action between the lines to the action on our figurative field of play, the Wall Street Journal on Friday published an article titled "This NFL Season's Fiercest Rivalry is Sports Betting versus Prediction Markets." And with just one game to go before the Lombardi Trophy gets lifted and CFTC regulated sports event contracts having essentially a full season in the books, this feels like an opportune time to check in on the status of the battle between those two models. Adam, after all the conversations you've had this NFL season with people on both sides of the counter, including recent travel all over the world, let's get your current point of view on the player profile across the two models. How much are traditional sports bettors extending their action into prediction markets, or how distinctly different are the demographics between the two products?
I think there's a lot of difference. Yes, there's going to be extension into it because it's another way to bet, and it's in states that don't have official sports betting. And from what I understand, there's a lot of rec players going through a number of these exchanges, services as well that are picking up some of this business. God, I can't think of the main one off the top of my head, but it's pretty much the same stuff. The UIs, I think, are a struggle. Players are generally coming in, again, from all sides. But where I don't think it's, a rivalry per se, I think it's, they're capturing some uncaptured volume. Generally, you're getting a lot of these American traders, which they kind of was the market for that they were looking at. But I think it's a bit of a hoopla. I mean, we saw some states recording, gaming wins, profit up and volume, all those aspects of it. And the one thing that I have seen highlighted is the app traffic driven. I would expect that Caesars, FanDuel and all those kind of things have got this traffic from many, many years ago over the course. So there is expected drop off. And yet you got a new one in town. I have also learned that a lot of these driving and these app numbers are make-believe because you can just pay small micro amounts to get uploads on these apps as well. So I'm not sure how real that traffic is in some of those questions, but I think it's for us, I think it's good because it now gives people more opportunity to arbitrage, play different numbers, educate themselves. So rivalry, I don't know if it's that fierce in our mind, but I guess that's how some see it out there.
And Joe, building on what Adam shared, states such as Pennsylvania and Massachusetts have reported record-setting months in December, with New York announcing its best week ever in early January. From this data, it doesn't appear as if prediction markets are eroding market share too much, even though Kalshi has been eating into download numbers, if we're to take a Next.io report from last Wednesday at its word. So with the benefit of a full NFL season with prediction markets offering sports event contracts, how do you assess the current state of the rivalry, if we want to call it that per Adam's qualifications, if we consider this season to be a round one of sorts?
Well, that's all it is. It's round one. I mean, a rivalry based on 1 year of operation and an incredibly limited product as far as the prediction markets are concerned. From a user experience, clearly the sports books still have provide a better, more diverse experience. I think where prediction markets are really, winning the battle, if there is indeed a battle or a rivalry, is in awareness. I mean, their Marcom teams should be given an A+ for, access to mainstream media and getting the message across. I can't pick up Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, any of these on a nearly daily basis without seeing a major article about them. So they're doing a great job. I think the interesting thing, though, is when you read most of the news and the analysis on prediction markets, one, they seem to largely either avoid or make scant notice of competition with sports books. I think that is a function of the message that the Marcom teams from the big prediction markets are trying to push, because they're trying to say that they are more than just sports books, when if 90% of their dollar volume is coming from sports, no, they're sports books. Okay, you can sit there and you can bet on, like, will President Trump stumble over words, or will this CEO mention this word or that word, or who will get more Oscar nominations and things like that. But that has not really captured the handle. If what we're looking for here is people expressing their opinion, their punditry through money, not just their opinions, there aren't a whole lot of pundits out there doing anything other than sports on those services. So it's too early to call it a rivalry. It'd be interesting to see if somebody has done a good job of carving out, like, just where the audience is coming from. But for the time being, it would be like, I don't know, somebody trying to say, like, a first-year fighter fresh out of Golden Gloves or the Olympics is a rival to Muhammad Ali. There's just not enough body of work there yet.
All right, with that, we'll pivot back to the topic sure to dominate the sports media landscape and beyond for the next couple weeks. Adam, where did you open the spread in total for Super Bowl 60, and where has the early action taken those odds?
So yeah, it opened 4.5, 47, and a bit late last week. I'm very, very surprised at how much volume there is this stage of the week. And we got 2 weeks this time. We're looking at 61% of the money on New England, 82% of the master money on the Seahawks. Total is about 71% on the under, 68% of the master money on the under there as well. It went from 4.5 to 5 to 5.5, back to 5, back to 4.5 so far since it opened. And the total has been pretty much 47 down to 46. So again, there's a lot of volume on this game already, both side and total. So even first half, they've come in pretty hard so far on the Seahawks. So it looks like it's going to be a big state game. I know that's, two teams that have good following on the bettors and, have a bit of histories from some years ago when they played each other in this same game.
Yeah, well, it sounds like in the early stages of this cycle, 5 is the number you're hoping to avoid the game landing on. I've got to imagine that's a more comfortable position than hoping the NFC title game didn't land on the 3. And from a prop betting perspective, we've known the Super Bowl matchup for all of about 15 hours as we record, but at some books, you can already find vast prop menus that will only get more expansive as kickoff approaches. So Adam, considering factors such as timing, breadth, and limits, what's your risk management approach to props for the Super Bowl compared to just about any other game?
Well, I think it's pretty much the same now. Props, gone are the days when everyone hung out for these props to come up Super Bowl week and no one really had the stats or the data of the course of the season and things like that. Props are just another ho-hum event that's happening every week from week 1 all the way through to the Super Bowl these days. So I imagine the numbers are pretty well set. We'll start seeing dribs and drabs coming out early on. I know when some of the bigger books usually had been sort of Thursday, Friday after the conference games are now generally Tuesday, Wednesday. So I expect to sort of see more and more coming out. As for volume and risk management, you definitely get more volume collectively, but there's just so many props and a lot of players that maybe aren't on a regular week schedule starting to pop up as well. So there's definitely some spots where the ones that go deep into the depth charts will have opportunity. And then obviously lineups, the way that potentially the game's going to play. There's a whole lot of analytics and whatnot goes into this, and trying to find maybe a way the game flows that isn't predictive as to where everyone else is seeing it, and seeing different players come into action there. So again, it's a Super Bowl, it's props, it's going to be up for a long time. People will get in their action, and then there'll be a lot of people that just Sunday morning start getting in their plays in 2 weeks' time, and we'll build up the volume from there.
And Joe, to quote Adam, it's going to be up for a long time. While there is plenty of time and build up to come before the Seahawks and Patriots are underway, what are you watching for this first week between now and Super Sunday?
I know we're nearly all digital in this space and everything, but I still like when, Superbook in Vegas starts printing out the old school sheets and putting them out in front of the counter. It's kind of like Christmas morning in some ways, and seeing how that rolls. Obviously, Adam's right. Everybody's already doing that. You don't need the big dramatic dump the way Superbook is doing it anymore. But I do kind of like that old school experience. Be interesting to see, harkening back to our previous spot, how much of this makes its way onto the prediction markets. This is one thing that the prediction markets seem like they should be able to translate easily, much more easily than doing, say, parlays, doing individual prop wagers. But in a lot of ways, I feel like they're just going to be cribbing the work of all of the sports books in order to post it up on their exchanges. But it definitely should be where I really want to see things go, is because obviously with proposition wagers on Super Bowl, state licensed sports books are limited on doing things like what color Gatorade and things like that. So some of those more weird exotic props that you can only get either like offshore or on the street or something like that. How many of those may find themselves into the prediction market environment because they're not similarly encumbered? They can be a little more free.
With that, we will put a pin in the Super Bowl until next week and shift gears, sticking with you, Joe. This past week, Underdog announced an investment in a startup called Regen, which is an automated savings platform linked to sports betting accounts. According to an SBC Americas article last Wednesday, this is basically a responsible gambling tool that allows bettors to automatically convert wagering activity into financial savings. At its core, Regen works by automatically saving a small percentage from every wager or trade, whether it wins or loses, setting money aside in the background to create savings without the user having to change how they play. We've discussed new innovations and ideas as a recurring theme on this show. So, Joe, what's your take on this concept and its potential market fit?
Not a new innovation in that there's been other schemes in other ways, whether it's been credit cards, online commerce, things like that, where people have done things like essentially enforced savings, rounding up to the nearest dollar amount and then squirreling the difference away in a savings account, things like that. They're things that, are they sound interesting, but never really generate big numbers or interest. It just seems like taking that and putting a responsible gaming trucker cap on it. I don't see how this makes it responsible gaming, because essentially it's kind of like a rebate scheme. Save more the more you play. Also, I'd be really interested to see how this might affect pricing on the different markets, because it's very similar to, like, for instance, if you have like Sky Miles credit cards and things like that. The credit card company is not paying for your miles. You're paying for your miles with increased fees. So will you be paying for your savings with increased prices on Underdog? I give Underdog and Jeremy Levine, who runs that shop, credit for trying to think out of the box and do something a little different. It doesn't seem like it's actually live yet. If you go to Regen. Hey, it's their fault. It's their fault. They wanted to make the association. Regen. So if you go to Regen's site, it's still kind of like a coming soon phase. But, taking something that has been a kind of novel experience in the past, generally in e-commerce, and trying to fit it into sports betting is interesting. But again, why not just offer rebates, cash rebates, without all the foo-for-rah?
All right, well, last but not least, we'll turn back to our resident Australian to hit on the Australian Open. The tournament began last week, with play continuing this week until winners are crowned this weekend. Adam, how has the action been so far? And beyond this major, what do you expect for tennis handle this year compared to 2025?
So our 2025 handle was really good. Tennis was, and this is the Australian Open just fits perfectly in the American market. It starts, around 4, 5, 6 o'clock, depending on which part of the nation. But it's always literally been the second biggest Grand Slam event for this time zone for betting purposes. Wimbledon, French Open, a lot of it starts at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., things like that. Yeah, you get your final early morning, whatnot. But behind the US Open, the Australian Open has generally always gotten really good action. It's early in the season. It's, NFL, college football, all those kind of things. And it's just another sport on TV that really fits into sort of January for American bettors. So volume's been good. Results have actually been pretty good in both Ohio and New Jersey the past week. And it's always a good event coming into the year and getting that sort of different sport on the menu. And as I said, just the time zone fits very, very nicely for the US market.
And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode. To the audience, and the spirit of tennis as our closing topic, we hope you viewed this one as us serving up an ace rather than a fault, but whatever you make of it, thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.